Recording. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the May 11th, 2020 meeting of the St. Louis Park School Board. As a reminder, due to the current federal and state emergency declarations and the safety concerns surrounding the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, this meeting of St. Louis Park School Board is being conducted virtually via Zoom in accordance with Minnesota Statutes 13D.021. As a reminder to school board members and everyone else attending the meeting, please keep yourself muted unless you are going to be speaking. All votes will be conducted by roll call, and this meeting will be available for viewing electronically in perpetuity. So first up, we will approve the agenda. We will have the superintendent's report, followed by discussion items, including the distance learning update, summer learning academy, the construction update, a recap of the listening session, an update concerning our policy committee, policy development, third reading of policy 812, use and conservation of energy. And then on our action agenda this evening, we have the approval of the third reading of policy 812 and communications and transmittals, and then we adjourn. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
By Ken, I think.
By Ken.
Okay, thanks,
Yep,
Ken.
Ken.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Colin here.
Thanks, Colin. All right, Flower, you want to do roll call?
Yes, I can. All right. Vote for Mary Tombeck,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Ann Hickey,
Aye.
Ken Morrison,
Aye.
Heather Woolsey,
Aye.
Lauren McClendon,
Aye.
and Colin Cox.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, passes 7-0. Superintendent's report by Superintendent Osai, please.
All right, good evening, Chair Tombeck, members of the board. This evening from our report, I would like to highlight a couple of items. I would like to start off by acknowledging our school-age care workers. You all may be aware that last week, Thursday, May 7th, the governor proclaimed as School-Age Child Care Worker Day. And as we have the last few times we've been together over the past couple of months, I just want to take another opportunity to acknowledge and thank all of the child care workers here in St. Louis Park Public Schools and across the state for that matter, for the work that they're doing to ensure that emergency responders and medical providers have access to child care during this time. I also want to just take a moment and acknowledge our staff again. Last week was Staff Appreciation Week, and in addition to acknowledging the hard work of all of our staff, I also want to take a moment to thank all of our community members, our students, parents, guardians, and community members as they participated in Staff Appreciation Week last week. And it was nice to see all of the communications, the sidewalk chalk, and other ways that our community, even from a distance, acknowledged the contribution of our teachers and staff here in St. Louis Park. So thank you to everyone who participated and for the acknowledgement of all of our staff members here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. Lastly, I would like to just take a moment and acknowledge our softball team here in St. Louis Park. They were recently awarded with and I'm gonna, my notes just 1 second, so because I'm gonna read off the names of each student pictured here, and then there were a couple of students that were not pictured that contributed to the accomplishment that they received. But earlier this spring, they were awarded the Gold Team Academic Award for Minnesota Fast Pitch Coaches Association for having a 3.954 GPA. And what the Coaches Association allowed for each team in the state to do was take their top 10 GPAs and submit them to be acknowledged. And two students that aren't pictured here, but that contributed to the team getting this award were Maya Betzer and Annie Holden. But I would like to just read off the names of the students starting from the upper left-hand corner, we have ninth grader Macy Alexander. Moving to the right, top row, Catherine Crocker, ninth grader Cameron Haley, ninth grader Samantha Meyer. We also have ninth grader Sophie Meyer, 10th grader Victoria Smetzel. We have 11th grader Hannah Holly, and 12th grader Caitlin Seaman, who also was awarded with Academic All-State. So I just wanted to take a moment, even though these student athletes did not get an opportunity to compete athletically, they continued to work extremely hard, and in doing so, were acknowledged by the Minnesota Fast Pitch Coaches Association. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Osai, and I know that we all agree with you that it is, we are very sorry for all of our athletes who did not get to show off their skills this spring, but congratulations to those players. Okay, first up, discussion items, distance learning update, and we are going to hear from Sylvie Lafayette, Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation, Dr. Patrick Duffy, Director of Curriculum Instruction. Sylvie, you're a doctor too. I messed that up, didn't I? Sorry. And then Dr. Mislowski. We've got a whole round here. Principal at PSI.
Excellent. Good evening again, Chair Tomback, members of the board. This evening, the purpose of our presentation is to provide an update on the planning and implementation of distance learning practices. This evening, we will Patrick will discuss staff training and collaboration. Corey will spend a little bit of time talking about immersion programming during distance learning. I will provide an update on our technology and internet access, the work we've been doing in that area. And Sylvie will spend some time sharing feedback from students, parents, and guardians connected to the district-wide survey that we conducted last week and will be conducting again this week, and we'll provide an update on attendance. Lastly, I will share some information about upcoming events and ways that we're continuing to try to recognize students during this difficult time, and Patrick will close us out with sharing future action and considerations. So Patrick, would you be willing to share a little bit about staff training that occurred on the 1st and 4th?
Yes. So on May 1st and 4th, staff took time to recalibrate our work for the remaining of the school year. We gave staff options during this time. We wanted to make sure that the staff had some autonomy to learn at their own pace. We really took time the first day for them to engage in the Minnesota Distance Learning Summit, which was put together by educators from all over the region, as well as engage in the professional development that our staff had put together earlier in the year. And then we encouraged staff to get involved in an extended time of collaboration on the 4th of May, and to get involved in lesson planning, unpacking their standards, and planning interdisciplinary units and common assessments that would make the rest of the year easier for them. And we believe that we got really good results from those 2 days.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Corey Mislowski at PSI. We are a bilingual community fostering global citizenship with a focus on our 514 amazing children. We've always been responsible for teaching the St. Louis Park grade level content with a focus on language. Serendipitously, and possibly more important than ever, one of our areas of focus this year has been building professional development. With building professional has been focus on vocabulary development within the 4 modalities of language learning, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We know that in order for students to be able to access grade level content, that they need to be able to access the vocabulary to understand that content. They need to be able to communicate, and they need to demonstrate mastery of language as well as content. Like in all of our St. Louis Park schools, I'm very proud of our students and our staff for working hard. I'm proud of our staff for really thinking outside the box and to find appropriate materials for our students. So we've had synchronous and asynchronous morning meetings. They're occurring like at school for updates, daily learning targets, vocabulary development, and community building. Some staff members have found that classroom after student surveys, they found that students wanted more. Initially, some classes were doing 2 or 3 times a week, and now many are doing 5 days a week. Other staff members and I have been participating as guests. I've been to 3 in the past week. Definitely one of the highlights of my week. And to continue language development and to get the kids moving, this morning in Senora Ruff's class, the students had to quickly find a cuchara, a lapis, and a zapato, or a spoon, a pencil, and a shoe. And so they got the kids moving because, you know, for some of the kids, despite being at 8:30 in the morning, it's still pretty early at this moment in time as they're getting out of bed. You know, teachers are also recording lessons for math and other content areas. Small groups are continuing to help students in math and Spanish language arts. And depending upon the grade level, these lessons are happening with the teacher, with our kindergarten classroom assistants, as well as Amity interns. Also, we have virtual small group lessons in Spanish for content and conversation. We know that students need to continue to utilize their language and continue to build on their fluency. And so this is occurring several times a week, anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week, depending on the student. In addition to writing written assignments, which, you know, can be emailed in, they can be photographed, we're also utilizing a variety of technology tools for students to be able to record and then respond to other students. That's done through Seesaw, Google Classroom, Flipgrid, and good old-fashioned voicemail. Students are submitting their oral responses. And then depending upon the grade, teachers are also providing office hours to help support their students. And our kindergarten classroom assistants have also been checking in at emergency childcare daily as another support in Spanish to those students. As a school, we continue to record books in Spanish and English, and that's shared through our weekly communications, teacher and school communications. Also very important at this moment in time is continuing to collaborate with our colleagues, with other immersion schools. I helped co-facilitate last week a discussion with about 40 other immersion administrators and teachers from the Midwest. And you know, we're all kind of doing this for the first time, trying to figure out how best we can support our students. And I'm confident that by us continuing to work together, as well as with our colleagues in St. Louis Park, we'll continue to develop student language to help them access content. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Corey, and I appreciate your humility, but if I'm not mistaken, you were one of 2 people that are a small group that facilitated those 40 immersion leaders from across the Midwest in that professional development. So thank you for not only your leadership here locally, but also regionally in helping to foster exceptional immersion programs. And what we'll do is, if the board is okay, we'll continue to move through and then take any questions you have at the end. Okay, great. The next item, so the last time we were together on April 27th, at that time I believe we shared with the board that we were working on securing mobile hotspots to meet the needs of our families who still were having challenges connecting to the internet. And since then, we've had an opportunity to secure those mobile hotspots, and at this point, we've distributed approximately 40 hotspots to students and families in need. We continue to monitor and assess where need is, and you know, the strategy that we'll use from now until the end of the year is the distribution of hotspots to help students. When we were together last, I know Chair Tomback and I shared conversations we've had with the mayor and city manager around this being a much larger issue than the public school district, and I'm hoping that at some point in the near future we'll be able to talk as collectively around how we can meet the needs of all of our students and families in St. Louis Park. Another piece that I wanted to update you on since we were last together on April 27th is that we have made the decision to allow students to keep devices over the summer. We recognize that, and you'll be hearing about Summer Learning Academy next, but at this point, we're anticipating that will be in a distance learning format. So instead of collecting and redistributing, we believe that it's best at this point to allow students to hold on to those devices, and we're working on strategies to collect those devices back from students who are 12th grade students, and then any other students who may be transitioning or to another school district before the start of next school year. Sylvie, would you be willing to share a little bit about the feedback that we've been receiving from students, parents, and guardians regarding distance learning implementation?
Sure. Good evening, Chair Tomback, Superintendent Osai, and members of the board. On the slide that you're looking at, that was data as of Friday. And so for the most updated data I wanted to share with you, last Monday, we launched the survey for students and families in terms of distance learning to help us evaluate our distance learning plan so far and what our families and students have been experiencing. Before we put out the survey, I do want to, say thank you to our Superintendent Advisory Student Group, because they looked at the questions to make sure that the questions were questions we wanted to ask of students and families, as well as our SOAR student group. So once they looked at it, we sent it out, and to date, this afternoon, we have 779 students that have responded. That's about roughly 16% of our students. There's a good representation across, we surveyed pre-K to 12th grade, so it's a fairly representative representation. We're getting more middle school student feedback as well. That was a lower group. And we have 489 families that have responded so far. Overall, elementary and secondary experiences seem to overlap, and then there's been some more suggestions that I'll share with you in a second for secondary, because as one student being at a middle school or a high school, you have multiple teachers. So there were some recommendations that our families and our students put forward. But overall, our families really appreciate the work that our teachers are currently doing, and they're a really generous and patient community. It's been really sweet reading their comments. They realize that our teachers are trying their best, and this is new for everyone. We're in an emergency distance learning situation. And they also noted that our families are also trying their best as well. About half of our students are reporting that teachers are giving really great feedback. So students are getting feedback on their assignments, and they know what they're doing well and what they're not doing well and what they can continue to work on. In our elementary and our pre-K programs, families and students have really appreciated live reading sessions. They've noted that, as well as class meetings. Most of our students are saying that the amount of teacher instruction during this time is fine. That's about 72.4% of our students, which is different than what families are saying, which is that they'd like to see more teacher instruction, and that's about 41.8% of our families saying that. Some ideas for improving distance learning, which I know some of our sites have already taken a look at with their teams and have incorporated, have made some adjustments that Sarah Thompson and I will include in our communication to families on Friday as a thank you for completing the survey. We wanted our families to know that, and students to know, that we're taking their feedback now and implementing some stuff. And so some ideas for improving distance learning is, one, asking for more consistency among teachers, the type of feedback, the amount of assignments, platforms being used, particularly at the secondary, to communicate with families and students, and just where assignments are located. They'd also generally like to see more live and recorded instruction. Most of our families want to see a mix. They'd also like teachers to hold meetings during different times so that students, particularly at the middle school and high school, aren't having to choose which time to attend a meeting. And I know that our teachers are trying their best, but this was a aha for me reading this, like, oh, okay, so maybe in the science department, math department, English department, teachers are talking and collaborating, but across those departments, trying to figure out who's holding a live meeting and when, so that those times aren't conflicting. And I know our secondary sites are looking at that. The last thing that was mentioned was perhaps less busy work and more time that allows students to be outside and learn beyond the screen time, attend to mental health and social emotional needs, and just thinking differently about teaching during distance learning, as opposed to thinking about distance learning as a way of still teaching the same things we would have taught if we had been live together. And then again, I always just want to mention, there are limitations to this data, although a lot of our families are noting that technology has not been a barrier. This is also a technology-based survey, right? And we tried to make this accessible to as many families as we can by changing it from SurveyMonkey, which we normally do our surveys in, to a Google survey, so then our non-native English families can then translate the survey.
Thank you. Would you be willing to give us an overview of attendance from week 4 of distance learning?
Yeah, how about, so week 4 is there. I'll give you the trends and maybe some noticings. So the first week of distance learning, we kind of took that as an adjustment period. Since the second week, what our department has been doing is sending to each site the attendance per each day from Monday through Thursday, because sometimes on Fridays, the attendance is taken late on Friday or on Saturday. So then we include the Friday absences in the following week data, so that you'll see that in the week 4 chart right there. But in terms of a range of absences, since week 2, the absences across the district has been about 5.2% to 8.7%. 8.7% was kind of an anomaly, and one of our sites reached out to us to let us know that they had to go back and correct some of their absences, so that was actually pretty high. Typically, the absences rate is near 6.5%. And what you're looking at here is a district example of what we sent to each site. So for example, Corey at PSI would be getting a PSI weekly absence data right there, and it's disaggregated by race, as well as EL group, free and reduced price lunch, and our special ed students. And in that chart, what you'll see to the right is, at the far right, is the total population of students within that group. And then to the left of that far right column is the percent of population absent on the highest day. And the reason why we did that for each week is so that sites could then take a look at their days of absences. So those are individual students to the left of the percentage, so that sites can say, hey, so maybe this was an anomaly or this is a trend. And for example, taking a look at our Native American students, although they might look like they are less absent, the percentage is actually pretty high compared to the community size of that particular site and of the district. And we want to make sure to pay attention to that.
Okay. The next thing that we wanted to do connected to this update is just share some upcoming end of year events. And I want to say that this list is not exhaustive, but it certainly gives an overview of some of the things that will be coming up and that we'll be looking forward to facilitating for our students and families in a virtual manner. So as you can see, next week, May 18th through the 22nd, we'll be doing our virtual kindergarten information week. This will include a lot of the things that we've done in the past, but we'll be trying to shift those virtually and trying to engage families around registration and enrollment. At each of our elementary schools, we do an end of the year 5th grade celebration, and I know that won't be any different this school year. Peter Hobart and Susan Lindgren are still confirming their dates. Aquila and PSI have kept the dates the same that were listed on the calendar, which would have been the face-to-face dates. On May 28th, we'll be hosting a virtual middle school rally night to really help our 6th grade families transition to the middle school. And on June 2nd, which was our original commencement date, we'll be hosting a virtual celebration of the class of 2020. And we're not ready to fully outline plans yet, but commencement, the date that we determined after getting feedback from students, parents, guardians, and community members was to move the date to June 23rd, and we're still looking at what our options are in conjunction with the recent guidance that we received from the Minnesota Department of Education around graduation. And to close, Patrick, if you could just share a little bit about our future actions and considerations related to distance learning.
Sure. As you can imagine, there are many considerations for the future as we try to think about what possibly could be. Many people are speculating about what the future is at this point, what the summer will hold, what the fall might hold, and many people keep asking, what do you think we're going to be doing in the fall? What we're looking at right now, I would say, is trying to figure out what do we do to prepare for if we're back to school face-to-face, but also be prepared to go into distance learning at any time. So we know that we must ensure that by the fall, our progress reporting practices are coherent with our strategic plan and mission. That's been something we've been discussing a lot this spring, is as we've been discussing progress reporting at the high school, middle school, and elementary. We've had discussions about how our progress reporting is different at each of those levels. And over the summer and going into the fall, before our first progress reporting next year, we want to make sure that we have a coherent vision around what it means to report progress and what it means to do grading in St. Louis Park for all of our parents and for all of our students. We will provide virtual professional development opportunities that ensure all secondary staff are consistently using Schoology and elementary staff are consistently using Seesaw. We saw in the data that Dr. Lafayette showed us that there is a need by many parents and by students to see that we are using less platforms to engage them, and that can become confusing. So we want to make sure that all of our staff are proficient in Schoology at the secondary level and Seesaw at the elementary level, as well as in our Google tools, rather than using random acts of technology to engage our students, no matter how fun they might be. We want to gather student feedback about strategic direction for distancing or face-to-face learning that will resume in the fall. We know that we've gathered a lot already, but we are a district that puts students first. So we will continue to gather student feedback throughout the summer, whether that's virtually or hopefully in person as soon as we can. And we will consider ways to leverage the consulting and design teams that you've heard from throughout this school year involved in our curriculum and program reviews. And we will leverage their support to bring vertical and horizontal alignment and a racial equity transformation lens through this time to ensure that we don't lose sight of what's important through distance learning.
Thank you. And at this time, take any questions that you may have.
This is
Okay,
Laura.
Laura.
Sorry. This is Laura McClendon. Can you go back to the attendance slide, please? Thank you. There's a lot to unpack about this. The free and reduced lunch numbers and percentages of absences. I'm wondering, has there been any digging into that or research into does that correlate with internet access? And I know that hotspots have been delivered. I'm looking back to try and find the number, but the hotspots, I know that after a certain amount of data, they will significantly slow. And if there's more than one person using the hotspot, obviously the data gets used up. So I'm just wondering, has that been looked at, that particular piece? And is there any planning going forward to try and alleviate if that is part of the reason why with the free and reduced lunch population that there are so many absences?
So in regards to the question about the technology and the increased data and the slowing of the device, we've not received that feedback yet. And I know Tom Marple's not on the call, but he could certainly speak to the capability or the functionality of the device. If that does become an issue, certainly, or if we hear that from feedback that we receive from students, parents, or guardians, we'll certainly look at ways to alleviate that issue. But at this point, that's not been a concern. One of the things that we didn't mention, but at each site, as it relates to absences in connection with students, there are leaders and team members at each site that are reaching out to families daily, right? So to your question around specifically free and reduced lunch numbers, I know that our staff are reaching out, and as they're reaching out and trying to figure out or get at the antecedent for what is causing the absence, if technology is listed as an issue, we work to try to resolve that issue for families. So at this point, every time that we're hearing from families that there's a need from a technology standpoint, we're working to get them the technology that's necessary for them to be successful. And I do see Tom here. I'm sorry. Tom, can you just add a little bit about the hotspots, or if we've heard anything so far about their functionality or ability to work once they've been used for a while?
Yeah, haven't received any feedback. They started going out Wednesday of last week, so I'm not sure how much they've been used. But just in the from the standpoint of the data is unlimited, so they will not be throttled at all in a monthly cycle or anything along that line. So they're an unlimited data. The device itself should be able to connect up to 6 devices per mobile hotspot.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes, thank you for the information about the hotspots and the fact that it is unlimited data. I know that there are other hotspots that are being used and it gets cut off at like 20 gigs or what may be, and I know that that can be an issue, but very happy to hear about the unlimited data, and the other information you gave me does shed some light and answer the other question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have anything?
Mary, can I make a few comments here?
Of course.
I reached out to some different parents too, just to see what their experiences are like. You know, the survey is really great to get some of that, and a lot of what I got was actually just some anecdotes of some nice things that teachers are doing, and you know, given that it was Staff Appreciation Week, and we know that they're working so hard to do so much. Just wanted to cover a couple of those real quick, and then make a couple other just general comments that, you know, everything from second grade teachers taking the time to teach kids how to use the mute button and why it's important and some of those things. Another teacher at the middle school who had what they called a catch up and relish day, which was, you know, a day for kids to get caught up and get feedback, or just relish simply in the fact that they got work done. And they were all caught up, which seems to be kind of in the spirit of so much of what we're trying to do right now, is just make sure kids are getting learning, they're getting engaged, and they have an opportunity to work with teachers as they need to. And then a couple of pieces of feedback too, were just continuing to kind of make sure that as we talked with some of the parents, that the language that we use is really as approachable as possible. I know there was a message that went out from the elementary school principals, and it was really, I took a look at it, and it was really sound in terms of like education kind of background, but I think for just parents generally understanding what was going on there, it seemed to get a little more complicated or nuanced than what what a lot of parents were just trying to understand. And I think there's also this urge, and I know I'm hearing different things, because I think there's this perception out there that teachers are just sort of shooting things out, and they're not, you know, and they're just grading things as they come in. But I've heard some teachers talk about really how busy they really are. I saw a video from one teacher who was just like, we're trying our best here. We're trying to engage with everybody. But I know that a lot of parents see that, as we've talked about before, that how much brighter kids will be when they get to engage with classmates and they get to engage with the teacher. And so it's just another thing underscoring how much interest there is in trying to find those virtual, like real classroom times where kids can connect. So those were a couple of different things that I heard from teachers or from parents as I just collected some information from them. Again, I'm excited to see what's going on. I've asked my own kid about it and just his experience with it. And you see the evidence. Another thing I was going to share, another teacher who sent out an email and just reminded kids about how much they see them. They really do see them. They don't see them physically all the time, but they get to see them and they get to see what they're doing and just reminding them how important they are. So I'll close with that and move on.
I have one thing, Mary. I was at the Early Childhood Advisory Council at 6 o'clock, and the parents who are part of that group are really impressed with the work that the early learning staff has done to make distance learning meaningful and relevant for our early childhood kids, our preschoolers, and their parents. They tried a couple of different things. The early learning team was included with a discussion about distance learning, and they're going to be part of the Seesaw platform starting in the fall. And the things that the parents really appreciated were all the efforts that the teachers have made to stay connected with the kids, to have planned, sing-along times and meetings so that the kids can kind of see and hear a little bit of each other. They had to cancel all their events, so now they're trying to rethink using technology to bring an event to the kids in terms of a concert at the end of the year. And then the final thing that they mentioned, just how impressive it was that they got the iPads from Peter Hobart and they were programmed with 4 buttons, easy peasy for most kids and parents to manage. That the paras dropped these off at families who needed them through the buses with the meal deliveries. So they're keeping kids engaged. What else did they mention? That, some of our kiddos have some underlying health conditions that would make it not safe for them to come back to school in the fall, because that's the hope that, right, that we can go back to school in the fall. And the Louise Rast and Mary Jabarian explained, we have a way to keep the kiddos who have to stay at home engaged if they can't come into the buildings. So I was really impressed with the robust thoughtfulness that had gone into deploying a technology platform for our littlest learners and the thought that they're going into for the future. All right, and I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Last call, Ken?
Heather?
Heather?
Or is Ken going to talk? Oh, wait.
Nope, I'm good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Sylvie quickly, what is a normal, during the normal school year, what's that normal range of absences compared to what we're seeing now? Do you have that?
I actually don't. I'm wondering if Corey is still on. Because normally what attendance, what they do at sites is, I know that they've been looking through PowerSchool, but because of our unique situation, we've been collecting that data in our department and trying to send that out. So I'm wondering if Corey can talk to that.
Yep. Hey, it's Corey. I haven't done a one-to-one analysis for this time of year. It's definitely lower, I think, right now than what it was during the flu season and in the middle of winter. I'm always perplexed as to why Fridays we seem to have more absences. But no, I haven't done a one-to-one correlation with a typical day.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
And we can certainly, we can certainly get that data and just do a comparison to be able, because I get what what you're asking for, Heather, is are we seeing better attendance percentages now than we did in the face-to-face format? So we'll pull that and make sure that we share it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just follow up on that real briefly and say, just attendance doesn't purely mean that we are or we aren't interacting with students. It does on a daily basis, but it doesn't mean that we're not somehow engaging with students. It's just right now everybody's faced with things, and just because a kid's gone, they might be taking care of a kid or a brother or sister, a sibling or something like that. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but that's the other thing. Just kind of an aha moment right now for me too.
And this is Ken. I agree, and that was kind of a point I brought up last meeting. I was wondering, are we able to measure how students are doing on the ones that are not being present in the classroom as far as the attendance? Is there a way to see if they are actually doing work those days? Just a sample, not all-inclusive, but a sample of that set?
Yeah, we could certainly get a sample, and the way we would have to do it is to work with, select a group of students, and work with those individual classroom teachers to figure out if those students are turning in work or not. But yeah, certainly, because we learned that early on that there were some students who were completing their work, but because of the way that we had our system set up, were being marked absent. So I believe that we've improved that, but it certainly doesn't hurt to re-examine and just make sure that we're accounting for students when they're in doing work.
Asin, I would just echo that I think we've tried really hard to ensure that if we know after the fact that a student was working on something, we go back and we have each of us at the site have people that go and correct the attendance because we don't ever want to penalize anyone.
Thank you for that. All right. And that concludes our presentation, Chair Tombeck.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the doctors, Lafayette, Duffy, and Maslowski for coming tonight. We see Sylvia and Patrick here a lot, but I did just want to give a special thanks to Corey for coming. I know that Laura is going to fill us in a little bit more on this during the listening session recap, but part of the reason that we asked Dr. Maslowski to come this evening is because at the listening session, we had some PSI parents who came just to share some of their experiences. I think that as we hinted on during the presentation, every teacher is experiencing their own set of challenges on how to deliver content in this environment. But in an immersion environment, there are unique challenges to that. When you're trying to teach 6-year-olds how to become fluent in Spanish by being able to be live with them for an hour a day is much different than in the classroom environment. So it was important for us to kind of hear the additional challenges that your team is experiencing, Corey, and how you all are rising to meet those. So thank you so much for giving us some firsthand information on that. Thank you to all of you very much for coming and presenting on these things tonight. So if there's no other questions there, we can move on to Summer Learning Academy update.
All right, thank you. I am here tonight to basically just give an introduction to a number of people who will be sharing an update and an overview of the Summer Learning Academy for the 2020 school year. Omar Adams will be giving a brief overview of what we plan for high school and middle school Summer Learning Academy. Jennifer Zip will be doing a brief overview of the elementary Summer Learning Academy, and Lisa Green will be doing a brief overview of summer enrichment opportunities through community ed. At this point, we are planning for distance learning for all of Summer Learning Academy, and if for some reason we're surprised by face-to-face, then we will, through the state, if they allow us to do that, then we will plan accordingly. I'll turn it over to our team now.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. We have been working really hard with all the different entities to just kind of get things moving. At the point, we weren't sure if it was going to be in person or distance learning, but definitely knew we had to get our systems started. And so now we've shifted to looking at the distance learning model and really trying to make sure that we can still offer all the things that students would have received if they had been in person. So we've been building our budgets and working with MDE and District 287 on what's going to be required in order to acquire the targeted services funding for our students this summer, and also working with community ed to try and make sure that our programs are complementary and both can be run from a distance learning perspective. Omar, do you want to add anything in there?
Nope, keep going.
All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. At the beginning of this process, we set some goals with Dr. Duffy and Lisa about making sure that we're really working to meet the district mission of enhancing the spirit of our students, not just having opportunities for academics. We want to make sure that our students are continuing to understand themselves as a leader in St. Louis Park and really deepen their connection with each other, with school, and to learning. And we know right now that's more important than ever. So Omar and I are working really creatively to make sure that what we're trying to offer students is going to meet those social emotional needs that we know our students have been missing out on so much during this time, and always wanting to make sure that we're accelerating their academics and offering, you know, real life experiences and keeping the rigor that St. Louis Park expects. For the elementary level, the things that I'm looking at is trying to be creative around doing lit circles, readers theater, book clubs, things like that, where students can engage either based on interest or in a multi-age group and gain different perspectives. Wanting to make sure that the math we're offering can really be applied to their life and making it more engaging while they're at home. Can they cook something together? Can they do a play store, measure, build, plan a trip, all kinds of things that would be aligned with the math standards for their grade level, but offering it in a different way, more of a project-based or inquiry-based than just a standards-based instruction. I really am a big proponent for elective style classes. We ran a really fun program at Peter Hobart this year after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays where students got to sign up for guitar classes, the Jungle Book Disney music production. We had maker space, we had a cook and book class, and we had over 200 students participating by the third session. And unfortunately, our fourth session was canceled, but the students just really thrived in those environments. So making sure that they're able to tap into their sparks. And obviously there's a ton of reading still happening in all of those classes. There's math that's embedded that they don't even realize. And so they're still doing the core instruction learning, but just in ways that are more engaging and interesting and spirit enhancing to them. We've looked at a couple different ideas of how we could specifically work with our multilingual newcomers, anybody who's been in the country for less than 2 years, trying to work on a vocabulary expansion program. I'm not sure what this is going to look like now that we're definitely in a distance learning capacity, but it is something that some of the elementary multilingual teachers and I have been looking at. We also want to make sure that there's social emotional support, whether it was in person or distance learning. We recognize that we want to proactively be meeting the child's needs and helping support them where they're at in the front instead of having it be reactive on the backside. So regardless of the fact that this is now distance learning, this is the stuff that we're focusing on and really wanting to offer great enriching experiences for our students here in St. Louis Park. Some of the challenges that I know I'm personally worried about is just really our K-2 students. There's some different conversation about whether targeted services funding will be provided for synchronous learning or asynchronous learning. I know that expecting a younger student to sit live in front of a device and do their learning for multiple hours is not realistic. And so we're really looking at, what are the different expectations from MDE and how can we make sure we're able to offer really strong programming, but still meet the needs so that we're funded. But the K-2 learners have struggled with some of the device availability or just not being able to use it as well or just their attention span. And so we want to make sure that they're still included, but we know that that's an area that we'll have to be really creative around. Some ideas are maybe offering morning and afternoon classes that they could do a little here, a little there to spread things out. And then also, engaging the students that are already not strongly connected to distance learning during the school year. We know that students are checking in different ways, at least for us at the elementary level. They might pop into a morning meeting and say hi, but they might not have any work completion on Seesaw during that day. And they're still marked present because they did engage with us. But how do we make sure that it's really strong for them, both in the connection piece and in the learning area?
Thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, Chair Tombeck, board members, and Superintendent Osai. One piece I'd like to add to the middle school piece is that we'll have English and mathematics, and I believe for the first time this year we will have science also. To speak about the high school summer program, we will again be providing the opportunity for students to recover credits through summer school. One way we're trying to make it easier for our families during COVID-19 is to utilize the Google form. This will allow our families to submit their registration and paperwork without having to come into the school or mail it. We're hoping that really makes things easier for our families. And similar to last year, we will be using Plato for our 10th through 12th grade students, which is an online learning program. Our 9th graders will have an opportunity to take classes via the distance learning format. And our goal, as always, is to make sure that our students are receiving credit. But I really think more importantly is for them to acquire the skills so during the school year, they're able to make all their credits and not have to come to summer school. That's always my goal or my motto. I tell students, what, I'm glad you're here to make up your credits, but I don't want to see you next year because I want you to make those credits up pass your classes during the school year. Are there any questions for us?
Can I just pop in? I just want to just say that in community education, in our enrichment programs, typically we've had a really great collaboration with the Summer Learning Academy, and we're able to have students who participated in Summer Learning Academy take our summer camps for free in the afternoon. And so with the potential and the quite possible distance learning direction we're going to have to go, our youth enrichment department is looking at seeing how many of our classes we can turn into online classes. So we're looking at that to provide some of our summer camps in an online method. And there may be some of the classes we could offer in person, say, for instance, if they're outdoor classes, there may be some guidance around doing that. We'll have to see. So that's what we're doing in community education.
Excellent. And if I could just add, I know this may have been covered, but I know Tom will be sharing a little bit about summer construction next. But due to summer construction, the locations for if we have the opportunity to be in the face-to-face format would be Park Spanish Immersion, if I'm not mistaken, for the elementary and middle school program, and the high school for the high school program. But again, that's in the case that we would be doing this face-to-face. And as all of our coordinators of summer programming have expressed, that we're moving forward planning that we will be doing this in a distance learning format.
Great, thanks, Aston. Ken, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a question to the summer programs. So, as we know, our students that are taking the summer classes, most of them struggled with learning the same information in classroom, and to try to do it via remote or online. In the current format that we're using for the rest of the students may not work. Do we have any thoughts or feelings about delivering the curriculum a different way on that summer learning program?
Ken, I'll speak for the elementary level. That really is my main goal, is to provide project-based experiences. I know for elementary level, for them to be able to be engaged in things that spark them is going to increase their engagement. And depending on if it has to be done live face-to-face versus pre-recorded, throws a different wrench in our game too. But we're really looking at encouraging staff members to develop programs that would allow reading in ways that aren't typically the way that we've been doing it. I know as a first grade teacher currently, when I'm delivering literacy instruction with my team, we're using our Making Meaning curriculum. We're following PALS. We're using the different curriculums that are part of our district. And so, yes, we've spun off from those and done different things. But I think for the summer programming, the staff that I've been working with have really been trying to think of creative and imaginative ways to meet those objectives and standards and benchmarks for the grade levels, but in a completely different way than has been done this year and during a typical school year.
I will also answer from the perspective of at the high school. I do appreciate your question, Board Member Morrison. We are trying to provide instruction in a different way. It's not giving the same, just louder and again. It's trying to really utilize hands-on learning, and given we're distance learning, so we can't do hands-on, but doing a different type of curriculum, trying to go about it in a different direction. One thing that we're doing for summer school this year is I've moved some staff around to provide more support for Plato, because the majority of our students are taking the classes on Plato, and Plato has a tutorial. Then they take a test, and if they struggle with the test, they can go back to the tutorial. But then we'll also have a number of staff in just about every curricular area to be able to answer the questions that the students have and give some one-on-one instruction.
That's great. And then so that Plato, I'm getting feedback. So that Plato, that's an addition that I think will be very beneficial to a lot of these students, because they will get that one-on-one one. I assume it'll be like set up a schedule or set up an appointment with the instructor, or the instructor would have office hours and you go in and meet up with them at that time or something.
Yes to it. Well, let me try and explain how Plato works. Basically, if I'm taking, say, an English class, I would go in and take a pre-test and see what skills I have, what skills I do not have. And based on that, Plato then tells me I have to take this many modules. So there's a tutorial. I go through, listen to the tutorial, then take the test. If I pass the test, I go on to the next unit. If I don't, I go back to the tutorial and get those questions answered. But if not, I can reach out to any of the number of teachers that we have. We have areas of math, science, English, and then they're also qualified in some other areas. So we make sure that we have licensed teachers in those areas, and if not, we get a waiver. But most of our content areas are covered by their licensure, by the teacher's licensure.
Okay, so they'll be able to ping them and say, okay, I have these questions, and then, okay,
Yes,
got it.
Yep.
Makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have a question, or a comment on a question. This is really some great work, and one thing I've been thinking as I've been, especially, well, for both levels actually, that this is kind of a laboratory for how to do distance learning on a smaller level. So I hope, and I'm sure that you guys are thinking about this too, that we can be doing some qualitative and quantitative measurement on the student engagement and student learning that happens this summer, and then take that feedback as lessons for how we continue to do distance learning if and when we end up doing more in the next couple of years. So I hope you'll report back to us later this summer. And I guess I have two questions. One is just, Jen, you mentioned the targeted services requirements, and I was just wondering have we gotten any guidance from MDE on that?
They're offering weekly webinars on Thursday, and the last one that both Omar and I attended, it was really the beginning of the conversation and recognizing the stipulation of synchronous learning for funding. And so they also had conversation around that they would be going to, higher ups to look at revising that given the current circumstances. So we don't know for sure, at least at the elementary level, if that will be something that will be waived for this year or how they'll be flexible with it. But I'll be attending the webinar on Thursday to listen for any updates and just kind of stay attuned as we're waiting to hear if Governor Dayton calls it, for the whole state for the summer. I would imagine they'll have to find some flexibility in that. So
yeah, okay.
It would be nice to offer so that people could attend if they're not able during the live hours. They could still participate. Evenings, as we're finding a lot of our students are able to go on after parents are done working at 6 p.m. and do stuff from like the 6 to 8 p.m. time. So
yeah. Well, great, thank you. And then is there any indication that we're going to have a different, I guess, need or demand for summer learning programs this year than we've had in previous years? Like, are we going to be able to handle if there's, do we think there might be a lot more students who are needing summer learning or not? I'm just curious if there's a chance that it's going to look really different than in previous years.
My thought is some of our students may be struggling with that. So I've tried to move some of my staff more into Plato. So Plato, we had 2.5, I guess, FTEs, if you will, in that area. This year I've decided to move 3 people there to be able to answer those questions, because one thing Plato does, if you don't pass that test, you have to have a Plato facilitator restart your test. So we're thinking about how are we going to do that, if they're going to kind of go on a Google Meet, or if they will send a message that, I need my test, or my Plato restarted, and to do that. Also having a staff member to be able to, another staff member to be able to answer questions that the students have in that area. So I'm hoping we have the need met. If not, I think we can always hire some people. This year, it seems like I have a number of people that are interested in doing summer school. So if we find out we have not enough staff members, I think we could quickly get up to speed and have them come in to be able to offer help. And since they are staff members of our district, they'll already have the use of Schoology, and that we'll just have, we can quickly set that up. So,
Sure,
but
thank
do I
you.
know for sure that we're going to have more people? I don't. But I think with the distance learning and just all the stressors of this situation we're in, I'm guessing we're going to have a higher number of students,
Yeah.
at least at the high school level. This is my first year middle school, so I'm not exactly sure what to expect there.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question here too? So is the idea of focusing on, as you put in there for the high school, like credit recovery and remedial work, or is there any focus for enhancement or for other things that if what I'm thinking about is how many parents may have kids home all summer and may be interested in some level of engagement, educational engagement, and we don't know what that looks like. Just summer camps are unclear, and what they're going to be doing through those things, and some of that stuff might be distance learning and things too. But I just didn't know if there was how much that would bleed into community ed or into some other area, or if there would be anything that we're sort of setting up or looking at in terms of that, if parents suddenly become interested in that.
In community education, yes, that is what we provide. And like I said, we allow students who are in Summer Learning Academy to attend for free, but they're also available for pay, and that's always the way it has been. But typically, we've only offered classes. It's usually from like kindergarten through 8th grade with a heaviness on K through 5. We could look at seeing if there's anybody who would be interested in providing something of enrichment nature for high school age students. So that could be an area that we look at for this summer.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Omar and Jen, for coming and talking to us a little more about your plans for the summer, and your flexibility is something that is admirable and very necessary right now. Thank you so much for planning for a variety of situations logistically and that our students may be experiencing. And I love to hear the changes or the kind of new focuses that are coming into play this summer. Hopefully that we'll learn a lot from that, regardless of how it ends up having to work. So thank you both very much. Okay. Moving on to construction update by Tom Bravo. New schedule, right?
Well, Chair Tom Beck, school board members, superintendents, I like to give everybody a construction update of where we are with current projects and projects that are going to be starting, because we are not going to be able to get back into the schools for teaching. We will be starting construction a little bit earlier. So next slide. So here's our schedule we had so far, and everybody has seen this. We're going to continue remodeling the early childhood. It is doing very, very well. We're right on schedule with that. We've hit some obstacles on the site, not interior, but the site. We found an old well that no one knew about. That was there probably when the first building was first built in the early 1900s. Also, the Middle School Media Center, we finished up that project now, and we finished up the 7 classrooms plus the breakout areas, and we do have a couple pictures of that, but it is very impressive. And when you do have the opportunity in the future to go and look at it, I think you will be very well, you'll be pleased with what we've done. High school weight room, again, we finished that already. That was already done, finished in March, and unfortunately, that's when all this happened. In the spring, we have started now at the middle school with the construction of all the projects that are remaining, performing arts, the front entry, the kitchen, the cafeteria, a couple of classrooms, a few classrooms, and some adjacent spaces. So we have started that project, and we're going to be prepared just in case, again, school does open up next fall. We'll be ready to have the doors open, and construction will still be going on, but we have areas that will help with, like the kitchen area. We do have a temporary kitchen space, and we do have a temporary entrance for the children to come in. And next summer, or this summer, I'm sorry, we are continuing doing the elementary schools, the 2 last elementary schools. All the 1,000 shop drawings have been reviewed. We have the permits, thank goodness, and we're ready to get things going on the elementary school cafeterias, the classrooms, and also the media centers. In the middle school, we'll be doing a lot of work in the middle school, early childhood, finishing up that. And in the high school, we'll be working on the theater auditorium and also the gym, replacing the flooring, those ceiling tiles that everybody complains about that every once in a while fall down. And thank goodness we've never had any accidents there, but now they're going to be gone, and we're going to be looking at a different type of a ceiling. Next fall, the construction of the middle school will continue and so forth. So middle school, we're doing the performing arts addition, the kitchen addition, again, the temporary kitchen and serving lines, front office addition, renovation, special ed classrooms, our cooling units, believe it or not, they are completed. We are 6 months ahead of schedule on putting cooling into the middle school. So next fall, they will be cooling into that building, every classroom. The art classroom renovation and miscellaneous classroom updates. Exterior portion has started, trees have been removed, we're fencing and so forth. And again, this project is about 13 to 15 months. Main project will start, we said June 8th, but now it's already started because of things that have happened. So on May 18th, once everything else clears out, on May 18th, the building will be 100% closed because we have to shut down some gas lines, shut down electrical power, and all those other pieces that we have to do in order to put these additions in. And we're working with CenterPoint Energy and others. So as you can see from the middle school, the picture on your left is the construction that started in the front, the Performing Arts Edition, and they're going like gangbusters over there. They have a lot of unearthing that we're doing. On the picture on the right is just a picture of the media center, a portion of that where this is where next stage of learning and so forth. And I think, again, you're going to be impressed when you're able to get in there because the classrooms are just phenomenal and so forth. Next slide, early childhood. We're proceeding as scheduled again. We had a meeting today. Everything looks great. Interior-wise, exterior, we did hit an obstacle, but we're working on that. We have meetings tomorrow. Central Clinic, we completed that earlier than we anticipated just because we got to go in there. The gymnastics gym and exterior walkways are going to be down starting on next week. The pool has been drained, of course, and upper gym is available. Still going to be available for the emergency daycare program. We have had several obstacles, like I said, in the exterior site work, but because we found an underground vault, which is turned out to be a deep well that was put in when the first building was built. And these are slides of early childhood. You can see the new entryway that we built on the side where early childhood has to be per code. And a lot of the rooms already have been furred out, taped, and we're starting painting on the second floor as of this week. So we are moving ahead very well on this project. High school, we're going to be starting that on May 18th with an upgrade of the theater, because of the fact that there were several issues based off a report in 2013. And of course, again, the main gym, putting in new flooring, ceilings, and so forth. And so we have purchased everything that we needed for this project, and everybody's ready to start on May 18th to get things going. That project will go all the way until November 1st. No matter if school does open up in fall, those two areas will still be under construction, but it will not impede or interrupt any opening of the school. There'll just be barriers around the spaces that we're remodeling. Aquila, we're continuing putting rooftop units as part of our indoor air quality for long-term facility maintenance. That's something that we told the state, and that's why our funding is available so that we can continue placing our old rooftop units and others in all the buildings. PSI, we're just cleaning up punch list items, but it won't, again, interrupt if there, for some odd reason, summer school does happen there this summer. And then, of course, Lennox, we placed a cooling unit and piping, and that project is ready, almost completed, and nothing will, it will not, again, interrupt any services that are going on if that building was to open up this summer. Central, again, like you talked about, just on the PSI side, we're working on the basement level of Central. That part will be closed after June 5th because we need to put in all new plumbing work under the ground. And so that section of the basement will not be accessible after June 5th. Susan Lindgren, we met with contractors 2 or 3 times now, and they are ready to start the renovation next week. And the goal is to be done sometime in August, hopefully a week or 2 earlier, so that we can make sure that we're prepared and ready when the teachers come back. Same with Peter Hobart, the same thing, working on classrooms and kitchen upgrades. District-wide signage right now, we have no news because all the signage companies are actually shut down. There are a lot of companies are shut down. We've received letters. We wrote letters to these companies and to the states to say that it's essential that they open up at least for the equipment that we need. And we've been fortunate and blessed that they have listened, and we are getting all our equipment and furniture built because of what we've been doing. Any questions on that?
No real questions. This is Ken. But the statements, I live right across the street from the middle school, so I was blessed with the morning wake-up calls from the trucks. But it was amazing how quickly they moved to dig a huge hole and fill it back in now. So they're making great progress over there. Excited.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Anyone else? All right, Tom, thank you so much for being here tonight and for filling us in.
Thank you very much.
All right, good luck. Hope everything continues to move well and that we don't end up needing any more time. Hopefully now this creates necessary space, literally and figuratively. Okay, moving on. Next up, listening session recap. Laura is going to fill everybody in on what we learned last week. 2 weeks ago? Last week. Thanks, Laura.
So the spring listening session was on April 29th, and I think that this ties in with strategy number 3 of our strategic plan, which you can read there. Next slide. Due to social distancing requirements, the listening session took place via Zoom, and participants could either join via video or they could call in. So you can see that there were myself, Karen, and Mary as board members, and Flower was able to join us to help with the digital piece, but Flower also was able to serve and give some parent perspective. And then parent, guardians, or community members, we had about 13 participants. Some of the highlights you can see here, obviously there was a lot of talk about distance learning. A lot of appreciation for all the hard work of teachers, staff, support staff, everyone. So that was a common theme. As mentioned earlier, we definitely heard some concerns from the PSI parent and community about the immersion environment, movement towards fluency, our kids going to be ready to move on to the next grade. But I believe that that was addressed during the distance learning update. So thank you very much for that information. Also concerns about multiple platforms and multiple ways to sign in. Once again, I think with the distance learning and hearing that there will be some over the summer training to try and make it more uniform. So once again, we're listening to that feedback from the parents and families and trying to make that better. And of course, lots of questions about grading, and the concerns obviously differed depending on the grade level of the student. I think that we heard the most concerns from high school parents, you know, looking at that, I think that the concern definitely came from how will grading affect like future opportunities or post-secondary chances. So there was lots of talk and concern about that. We heard a bit about standardized testing. I think that there was a lot of happy parents that we don't actually have the MCA this year, but there were some questions about having more accessible information on how to opt out of the MCA. It does seem that there are some parents that do understand that a test score, that those are counted as fails against the district when we're looking at district data. Then there was some talk about the grade incentive for high school math MCA so that students would be incentivized to take the MCA. And just concerns about how test scores are used for support, intervention, gifted and talented. I think one thing that we were able to respond with is that test scores is one of the many data points that we would look at as a district, as teachers or administration are making decisions about support intervention or qualifying for gifted and talented, and that there's other data points and teacher input that would be used for making those types of determinations. There were questions about summer school and what will it look like due to the pandemic. Once again, I think some of those questions have been addressed during this meeting, and I'm sure that'll be communicated to parents. And also I know that things are changing, it seems like almost every day. And then there were a few concerns or questions about high school culture and discipline. And I think, Mary, you were able to speak about how that was addressed during the principal interview. Did you want to add to that?
No, other than to say that, this is a transition period right now at the high school, and that students were able to ask some questions to candidates, and I'm hoping that those same questions can be asked moving forward when we continue the search a year from now. And so, yeah, we're always open to hearing concerns, but that was one parent's view right now. So,
yeah, and what Mary just said is the what I was looking. I didn't know the exact wording, but that during the high school interviews, that students were able to ask questions, and I think that when that was communicated to parents, that was appreciated, that students were part of the interview process and having some input into their own school culture. Yeah. So possible next steps, I think that we addressed the first one. Definitely that information was important, and let us know what PSI and just immersion in general is doing to continue to move those students forward in their learning. One thing that we did notice was that from what we gathered, that the parents or guardians, it was from white families in St. Louis Park, and that there were a bunch of other populations that we did not hear from. We were wondering about if we offered translation services, would that have increased participation? And should we maybe specifically go to areas or target areas where we know that there are large families and students, but maybe they don't either have the access or they just don't have the information, or once again, the translation services. So that was an area that we thought that we could try and open up an additional listening session to. I think that's all that I have. Are there any questions or additional comments from the other people that were there?
I just really appreciated the robust conversation around PSI. And again, at my early childhood advisory council meeting, one of the parents has kids in multiple buildings, and she was really pleased with the changes that had already been implemented from the time that we had the listening session to now the school board updates. So I really appreciate how the feedback was taken seriously and acted upon so quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that.
Actually,
Oh, I'm
this is
sorry, Ken.
Ken, and I had a question.
Yeah, sorry, Ken.
That's all right. I wasn't quick on the mute thing. So my question was, I had two questions. I'm going to try to remember what the first question was, but the second question was around, oh boy, I should write it down. I've completely forgot it. I lost my train of thought completely.
Well, you know what? It was a presentation by 3 people who you know how to get a hold of. So.
Yes. Well, actually, one of the questions was going to be towards staff, but I'll remember the question after I read through a little bit this more and think about it for a bit. Sorry about that. Go for it.
No problem. All right. Then next up, Anne is going to give us an update on the activities of the policy committee.
Yes, I'm excited that we're getting going, and Heather and Laura volunteered. If you recall, I think the last time we talked about it at the board table, I was sort of asking for volunteers. So Heather and Laura volunteered to be part of this initial run of our ad hoc policy committee. We are planning to have our first meeting on May 19th, Tuesday, May 19th, a week from tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. And that will be just like this, a Zoom meeting. It will be a lot like our school board meetings in that it is an open meeting, but that it is a school board, a meeting of school board members. So it's not an open meeting for anyone to speak at, but that it would be a public meeting, a meeting that happens in the public. So the link will be posted to that on our website, just like a normal school board meeting, and the agenda. And our first group of policies is a group of policies from, I believe, the 700 series around the topic of transportation. And that was a request from Director Magnuson to start with some transportation policies that needed a little bit of cleaning up. And just to remind everyone, the role of the policy committee is to kind of take that first deep look at the policies and then make recommendations to the board, but that the board will absolutely review the policies and then they will be passed at the board table. There's no action taken by the policy committee. That'll just happen with the full board. So look for that maybe at our next board meeting already. To see some transportation policies that have come through the policy committee. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Or Laura or Heather, do you have anything to add?
I just, so sorry, and I just wanted to clarify one thing, that the meeting, not that it makes a difference, will be held on Google Meet and not Zoom.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm even looking at it and I can see the invite here, but thank you. On Google Meet, but the link will be on our website.
Yes, correct.
And thank you to Flower, who has very much helped organize all of this and get everything set up. So she's been a rock star through this whole thing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you to all 3 of you and Flower who are going to be carrying this work forward. I'm really excited. I think this is going to add a lot of great efficiency, and it's going to make our policy work even more robust, but in a more effective and efficient manner. So thank you guys so much for taking the lead on seeing how this works for the board. Okay, now we have policy development, the 3rd reading of policy 812, use and conservation of energy. And I'm going to actually just go ahead and go right to Anne, if that makes sense, because you did a little bit of background.
I requested the extra time, so that's fair. If you remember, we had this on our agenda last time for a second read, and I kind of I don't know, hadn't had all my questions answered. So, or I hadn't asked all the questions I needed answered. I should say it that way. Blame myself. So Tom Bravo was very helpful in answering some of the questions that I had about this policy. He does believe and request that we do continue to have this policy in addition to the health and safety policy. That was one of my questions, whether this was redundant in the health and safety policy, but he thought that because of some state and federal regulations and other kinds of, just that the topic is a little bit different. So I talked through that with him, and so then what I did was I looked at the policy, and I wanted it to look a little bit more like our normal policy, our usual policies. So what I did was the one that you have in board book, just kind of cleaned up the language in the purpose statement and the general statement of policy so that the purpose statement is much more high level. It was quite a bit more detailed in the original, I guess, redraft of this. And then in the general statement of policy, I told Tom, I didn't actually delete or add any language. I just moved it around. I read that something like 95% of editing is just moving words, putting words in a different order. It's not actually using different words. So that's what I've done here. And that is what is in front of you that I submitted to Flower as a suggested amendment. I would actually add one additional amendment, suggested amendment, which would be just to call this indoor air quality, and then end at that, just because it is a little bit wordy, the title. I would just say indoor air quality and leave it at that, if people are in agreement on that. So I think that is what you see in front of you. So ask your questions.
And should be indoor air quality for schools? Indoor air quality for district buildings? Do you think that matters?
Let me look at.
Well, because in the purpose we say in school district buildings.
Yeah, in section 800, things are pretty brief in the titling. It's crisis management, health and safety, naming and facilities, closing of a school building. I mean, yes, that would certainly be fine. I just didn't want to, in this.
To be consistent with the other 800 series, that makes sense. Just go into air quality. Okay, does anybody have any additional thoughts or questions or want to comment at all on the editing or the edits?
And just as a reminder, the operational procedures are considered to be administrative procedures, and they're not part of board policy. So there are quite a bit of procedures, but those are essentially exactly what Tom Bravo submitted to us.
Right, and we generally don't comment on those. We just use them to inform our view of the policy.
Exactly.
Okay, well, Anne, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for doing the legwork on this policy. And if nobody has any further questions, we will revisit this during the action agenda.
I'm happy to do it
now. And so it is recommended that the school board approve the third reading of policy 812, use and conservation. No. It is recommended that the school board approve the third reading of policy 812, indoor air quality, as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second?
Second, Heather.
All right, second, Heather.
A lot of seconds.
Lots of seconds. So great. I'm assuming then this will pass. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Flower, could you please do the roll call?
Sure. Vote from Mary Tombeck.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
Laura McClendon.
Aye.
And Colin Cox.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, passes 7-0. So that's it for our action agenda tonight, and we are already at communications and transmittals. Fire away.
Go ahead.
Karen.
All right, since I see a few of you, let's go ahead and start with Karen.
Okay, I want to mention that The Children First Ice Cream Social is now a virtual event on Sunday, May 17th from 2 to 3. If you go to their Facebook page, you will get the details of how to join in our first ever Children First virtual ice cream social. And thank you so much to Margaret Granio, our new executive director, for finding a way to stay engaging with the community. And I'm also enjoying her Dad Friday Jokes initiative. And I think Ken and Colin and Aston should probably be nominated to come up with some Friday dad jokes. And that's all I've got. Thanks.
All right, you heard it, gentlemen. Get yourselves your thinking caps on. All right.
I would suggest our gender inclusion policy means that anyone should be able to submit a dad joke. And I watched all those dad jokes, and I think I might have something better. So I'm going to submit one this week.
Way to go, Anne.
Excellent point. Always the policy police person. So very good. Okay, Colin.
Well, I was going to say some dad jokes are actually good. Okay, so that's the other thing we should keep in mind. I just briefly wanted to another shout out to some excellent work by teachers and coaches and whatnot, and that my son got notification that this is T-shirt week for the middle school for their musical. It was one of the casualties so far in terms of things. We've seen sports activities and we've seen extracurriculars fall away, and they came up with an innovative idea in terms of encouraging kids to wear T-shirts this week from the different shows, and even create their own T-shirt for James and the Giant Peach, which would have been the show that they would be doing. And they're actually going to do a read through of the show on Thursday night with the cast. And they're also going to learn some choreography. And I just think it's really fun to see that we have people who are dedicating extra time. Again, these are teachers who are saying, you know, we're pretty busy as it is with all the things that are going on in the classroom, but we really want to see and engage with the kids. And I think the teacher was saying that, you know, that this is the first time she hasn't been able to do a spring show in 13 years. And I think that's kind of a loss for her, but I just love that they're really embracing this and really trying to make sure that kids can still have creative outlets like this.
Thank you. Heather, did you have stuff tonight? Okay. Oh, wait, no, no.
Nothing from me this week.
Okay. Laura?
Yes. I was invited and am part of the Minnesota School Board Directors of Color, and I was able to attend my first meeting for that on Saturday, May 9th. I'm really excited about the work. I think that they've been a group for a few years, but now that, which is a good thing, that there are more school board directors of color in the state of Minnesota, that has become a more formal organization, and we are working on our mission statement. And I am the team lead for programming and ways that we can support, obviously, school board work and our students in the state of Minnesota. One thing that I would like to share is that I am extremely grateful for the board and the superintendent and the cabinet that I get to work with. I feel extremely fortunate and lucky that within my first 4 months, I seem to have hit the jackpot, and that we all seem to have similar mission and vision and commitment to it, and that although we all have different personalities and ways of addressing or approaching problems, we really do keep the students and education at the center of what we do. So I'm very excited to be part of that, and I'm working on that for the benefit for all of our students. And I just wanted to thank the board that I get to work with and have the opportunity to. So that is all I have to share for this week.
That's really exciting news. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And please definitely report back on the activities of the group, because that's a benefit to students across the state of Minnesota, ultimately. So thank you. Ken, did you have anything?
Sorry, I had nothing.
You have nothing. All right.
I did remember my question, but I just wrote it and sent it to you. So.
Well, go ahead.
The question? Sure.
So.
So the question was, Laura, you were talking about at the listening session, they were wondering about the opting out of standardized text or the state test. And oddly enough, my daughter was at NDSU last year, this year, and she did pretty well in the ACT. She got about 28-30, and she did pretty well in her classes, her advanced math classes, but she opted out of taking the MCAs. And so this question is to you, Dr. Duffy, or whomever could answer this. When she went to NDSU, they told her she had to take the placement test because she didn't have a really strong ACT, and her they didn't have a standard or a state test for her to measure anything else against. So they made her take it. She didn't do really well, so she had to take that standard math class, algebra. So I was wondering if there's a way to know which schools, colleges would really look at that state test, or if that's even really true and they just blew smoke. So I don't know. So that was just a question, and people can think about it and give me some answers later. But it from what she says, standardized tests are more than just you don't have to take it. More than just a measurement. So
great. That's what Ken is communicating and transmitting tonight. That's
what I'm communicating and transmitting, yes.
But that's a good, that would be great for us to kind of figure out a little bit more about, particularly then as we're trying to encourage our students to be taking the MCAs, or to at least understand completely what the pros and cons are of their decision to opt out.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, I do not have anything either. So if nobody else.
I have one thing.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. One quick thing is that I spoke with, we had a phone message on the school board line from one of the aides to Congresswoman Omar, who's just reaching out to school boards around her district and just kind of wanted to connect on what we're hearing and concerned about. And so I did pass on to them in particular the conversation that we had about internet access and some of the things that Mary had said about how the issue of internet access is much bigger than just for our students, but it's truly an issue for their families in getting information at this time. So I did pass that on to them. And then I was also on the call with Commissioner Ricker earlier today, the Commissioner of the Department of Education. And not too much really to report from that. I think people heard about the guidance on graduations that came out on Friday. There was quite a lot of discussion about that, and whether there was going to be any flexibility, and the answer was no. And then a lot of people asking about the plans for not only next year, but really what happens with summer learning. This is why I asked Jen Ziff about the guidance they'd gotten from MDE, because it does sound like she's promised that it's coming. She said soon, but I think that's a relative term. But she did say that they were planning to kind of link the decision about school age childcare for the summer with the summer learning guidance, so that hopefully that would all come out together, and hopefully soon. But she did, of course, point out that the issue is, and this is what we've seen all along, is that we're really trying to, the Department of Health and MDE are really trying to do the best guidance with the contemporary information that they have on what the disease is actually doing. And so everything happens very, very quickly and needs to happen as close to as late as possible, so we have the best information possible. So not too much to update on that, but those are the kinds of things that that people are asking and talking about. And then I guess the last question also was about planning for the next biennium at the legislature, and again, sort of a lot of unknowns going forward. So we do have we're in the second year of the biennium, going into the second year of the biennium now. So we'll have our 2% unless something goes really crazy in the next year. But then it'll be another budget cycle next year for the legislature. So I think that is it for me.
Thank you very much for listening to the call and for learning that we still don't have any answers, basically. And it's really funny to hear you say something like, unless something goes really crazy, because a year ago we could have used that phrase and had no idea quite how crazy everything was actually going to go, right? Everything has become relative in terms of the definition of crazy at this point. Surreal, our new favorite word. Okay. So with all of that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
All right, moved by Colin, seconded by Anne. And Lauer can do the roll call, please.
Vote from Mary Tombeck.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Ann Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
Laura McClendon.
Aye.
And Colin Cox.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, passes 7-0. We're done. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you. As a reminder, the next meeting is on the Tuesday after Labor Day, or Memorial Day. So see you 2 weeks from tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you.